Hey everybody, welcome to the All City Chess Club podcast. I am your host, James Cordy. Today I have with me Marty Meersman of Marty's Waffles. Marty's Waffles is a food business. As far as I can tell so far, it is centered around a food truck, but he also has some partnerships with local businesses, some wholesale agreements, and I believe, Marty, if I'm not mistaken, online ordering for local pickup. Is that correct?
The online ordering is for special windows of ordering. We don't do sort of Grubhub or DoorDash, any of the delivery type services. We have a product that doesn't travel very well with fresh whipped cream. By the time somebody would get it, it would be a mess. But we have windows where people order waffles by the dozen, and right now this is our busiest sort of 3 weeks of the year with that. So
that makes sense. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And what I'm always really interested to know, and what I've learned in a lot of these conversations I've had, is sometimes the most visible part of the business isn't always the big revenue generator. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But before, kind of want to mix it up for this show. You know, a lot of times, we always go through what I refer to as the creative, the strategic, and the financial aspects of kind of exploring entrepreneurship. And I often do those kind of in order. This time I want to really dive into some of the fun questions I have, and then we'll back into, some of your background and the numbers, which I know people are always interested to know. So let me start off by asking this. You've been doing this for 10 years, according to your website, since 2013.
Right. On
a scale of 1 to 10, how happy does it still make you to be making and selling Belgian waffles?
I've been asked this question a lot. I would say probably 90% of the time I'm pretty happy, which is pretty good. I think most people in their jobs, they would probably say that's a much lower percentage, but I'd say 90% of the time.
Heck yeah. So 90% of the time it's still absolutely where you want to be, and it's an 8, 9, or a 10 out of 10. Is that understanding?
Yeah. I mean, when 10 years ago when I started this, I had no idea I'd still be here. I mean, you tell somebody you're going to start selling waffles out of a van, and you get a lot of strange looks, but here we are 10 years later.
Heck yeah. So with that in mind, could you, I know that you were up to different stuff before this, which we're going to get into.
Right.
Could you see yourself doing another food concept, or do you think if and when, talk to me about that. Could you ever see yourself doing another food concept? Do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life, or do you have other plans and, you'll move on from this at some point?
Oh, well, I do not want a brick and mortar full-time 7 days a week. Even if you're open 5 or 6 days a week, it's a 7-day-a-week job if you've got a brick and mortar. One of the things I like about the food truck is the flexibility. And after 10 years, a lot of what we do is repeat and referral. And I don't pick 100% of my schedule, but I can be a little bit pickier with what I do. So I have a little bit of extra sort of recharge time, as opposed to the grind for the first 5 or 6 years where you're taking everything every day, all day long, all year long. So,
building up clients, right?
Right.
Well, that makes total sense. So the flexibility of the food truck, the mobile aspect of the business versus having a restaurant where, like you said, you're kind of just locked into being there every day. Even if you're only open 5 or 6 days, the other 2 you're cleaning and managing and setting schedules, and in essence, you're working all the time. Could you see yourself doing a different food truck concept, or is it a why would I do that? I read the story on your website about how you basically fell in love with making the perfect waffle.
Right.
So I'm just trying to gauge, is that still where you are, or is it, no, I could see myself doing something else. I love to cook. I love food. Or tell me a little bit about that.
Knowing what it takes to start a business and sustain a business, I don't know that I would want to go through the struggles of trying to promote and push a new concept. It took me a good, I'd say 4 to 5 years before I felt comfortable with what we were doing in the future of the business. I mean, there were a lot of times where you sit for 12 hours in a parking lot and you're wondering, what the hell am I doing here? Because you've sold maybe a dozen waffles, and you come home and your wife says, well, how was your day? And you have to be honest, and then you get you're not quite sure. But I'm comfortable with the waffles, and we're looking at different ways of expanding and kind of growing the business and branching out a little bit in things that are waffle related. I mean, I love food. I love desserts. So my family, we grew up around food, and a pie truck would be really fun. I love homemade pie, but trying to reinvent a brand and do it as successfully as Marty's Waffles, I think that would be tough.
For sure. And you said what I was just going to say after hearing your answer, which is you spent a decade building a brand. You have a brand, and to start a new concept, if it wasn't something you're attaching to the current brand, yeah, you're kind
Right.
of starting from scratch in a lot of ways. No one's heard of
Right.
this new business. You're now selling, burritos or whatever, and you have to go and
Right.
build this from scratch again. So, yeah, having heard the answer, that makes a ton of sense, Marty.
Hmm.
Um, I wasn't planning on this being the next question, but because you kind of alluded to it. So again, I was reading online about you guys and some of the different aspects of the business. You've got the food truck. It looks like you're at an event maybe once a week, sometimes twice a week. It also looks like you have your products available at some local coffee shops and stuff like
Hmm.
that. If you don't mind, break down kind of the different pillars of the business along the lines of what I just said and give me a sense for what the biggest piece of the business is in terms of income.
80 to 85% of what we do is private now. After being in business for 10 years, we do a lot of repeat and referral business, a lot of corporate stuff, a lot of stuff with schools. In May, there's teacher appreciation. It's one of our busiest weeks of the year. Then I would say public events. We don't do a ton of those anymore just because we're so busy during the week. And we love the big food truck rallies, and they were a blast when we did them. But at this point, they're exhausting. They're just such resource heavy events. And you're usually prepping the day before, and then you've got a 16-hour day, the day of the events, if not longer. And then the next day you're just exhausted. So it's a 2 or 3 day commitment for really an event that only lasts one day.
And there's
As
no
far as
guarantees
other,
at those events, right?
there isn't, no.
Sorry to
And
interrupt your
then,
train of thought.
well, you're fine. We also wholesale. We have a permit through the FDA that allows us to wholesale waffles to some coffee houses, some restaurants. We're at NKU in their student union. We this year, as well as last year, we're at Perfect North Slopes. Yeah, and then one thing that we've done too recently in the last 2 or 3 years is we've started a fundraising sort of arm where we sell waffles to, well, schools will sell waffles, and then they'll give us a total count of the number of waffles we need to have for them, and we deliver them. They write me a big check, and then I write them a check for 20%. And so, it's a win-win for everybody. They get a donation, and we get a big order, and there's very little overhead compared to the big food truck rallies, and that seems to be a direction that is working out well for us and doesn't require a whole lot of overhead compared to the other public events.
So I've got like 4 questions coming out of that. That was all super,
Yeah.
super interesting. So public versus private events. If I'm on your website looking at where you are next, those are public events, correct?
The website has a list of our schedule, and it could be public or private. And I think
Okay.
my wife tries to designate between public and private. We can't. There's a lot of private events we do where there's a guarded parking lot where you
Right.
can't
Don't just
access it.
show up.
We have people that do that, and sometimes they get turned away. Sometimes I'll say, well, we could squeeze you in here. There's nobody out here, but yeah, we try to make sure everybody's happy.
Okay, cool. So what I'm seeing on the site is public and private. So
Yeah,
you mentioned as well, for those that aren't local, Northern Kentucky University, and then Perfect North, which is a ski slope.
correct.
Perfect
Yep.
North is actually in
Lawrenceburg.
yeah, Eastern Indiana. Okay. So what part of percentage wise overall, I guess, what part of the business is that? Is that 15%? I think you said that the events, public and private, are like 80 to 85. So is the remainder that wholesale piece of the business in working with third parties?
Wholesale is probably 10 to 12% of the business in years past.
Okay.
When COVID hit, we lost some customers to that, and we've kind of picked up a few, but the wholesale is less than it was in years past. So
Got it. Okay, cool. So actually being out on the truck serving food at private and public events is the majority of the business, which is, I think, what most people assume when they think about it, a mobile food business, a food truck business. So cool. Okay. When you're doing an event, and I think I saw something maybe about a women's soccer team that's coming up, or maybe it was back in September. Regardless of who the client is, when
Yeah.
you're doing an event, let's say it's with a school, for the teachers appreciation event, like you mentioned, how do you think about billing that? Obviously you have your food costs, but is it like costs and materials plus a flat fee for you to spend your entire day there? And what does that look like? Depends on the number of people, I suppose. Just tell me a bit
Yeah.
about how you do that.
There are a lot of variables that go into pricing. So I have to take into consideration the time of the week. So if it's midweek, it's usually not as busy. If it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, it's a lot busier. Sundays are sort of, after 10 years, I kind of covet Sundays. So if I'm going to go out on a Sunday, it's going to be worth my time. And then you factor in the number of people you have to serve, the distance you have to travel, the menu that they want. Did I say duration? How long the event is? So yeah, there's a lot of variables, and then I kind of figure out, what that is, and if it's something I can do myself, or am I going to have my employee come and help me too? All of those things factor in, and then I have to, I've got my overhead expenses that I have to meet just on a daily basis. So yeah, I usually have minimums to come out for private events. So.
And what would that look like, Marty? What would a minimum be? And do you make an assumption around a number of people for the minimum, or is it just, hey, variables aside, if we're not bringing in, again, what is that minimum?
So if it's Monday through Thursday, the minimum 600 for 2 hours. If it's Friday or Saturday, it's 800 for the first 2 hours. And on Sundays, it's $1,000 for the first 2 hours. And depending on the menu, that would serve X number of people. And then obviously, if you have more people, then that would, increase what the charge would be. But in order to come out, there's a base minimum to be able to do that. And, obviously I don't come out to break even either at this
Sure.
point. So.
Would you say the average event is around 2 hours?
Yeah. Yeah. 2 hours is usually about the length of most events. We can usually serve up to 150, 200 people in 2 hours. Now, if we serve for 2 hours, that's just a portion of the commitment of time for that event.
Sure.
I've got travel time, I've got setup time, I've got preparation time. So I might have 7 or 8 hours into an event that only literally lasts 2 hours, but there's 6 or 7, maybe 8 hours into that time.
Sure. That makes total sense. Okay, one more question before we kind of give the listeners a little bit of background as to how the
Yeah.
heck you got into this business, what you were up to before, and kind of what drove the decision to go down this path. But one of the things, again, that I learned in reading on your website about you and your wife, Julie, a bit, is that you're an artist. You're a sculptor. You have a degree in photography as well. You spent, if I'm not mistaken, quite a few years as a professor of art, correct? Of sculpting?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I taught foundations, which is freshman classes, and I taught some sculpture classes, and then a business of art class. Yeah.
Cool. And this was it both at Northern Kentucky University and University of Texas at Austin? Is that me remembering correctly?
And the Minnesota State University Moorhead. That's where I started out of grad school. I went to UT Austin for graduate school, and then moved to Minnesota, taught for 4 years there, set up or kind of renewed a sculpture program. And then when I moved back to Cincinnati, my wife and I both taught at NKU. She's still there. I was there from 2003 to 2014. And I taught foundations classes, some sculpture classes, and a business of art class. Yeah.
And she's a graphic designer by trade. Is that what she teaches as well?
Correct. Yeah.
So I said all that up to say you guys are a couple of creatives.
Yes.
What role does creativity play in your business, and what ways do you get to be creative within the context of Marty's Waffles?
Well, obviously the food itself. I mean, we wanted to create something that was unique and something that wasn't served by anybody in town. Creativity when it comes to the brand. Julia is very adamant about making sure that everything is very well executed. If I try to design something or throw something out there, she will quickly pull it back and say, "Oh no, you can't do this. Let me work with this a little bit." It's very important to be brand consistent and make sure that whatever we put out there, it doesn't matter what it is, it's consistent with the brand. And creativity is very important. You have two creatives, so you're never happy with the baseline of anything, and you always say, "Well, I think I could do that better. Or I could, make sure that we put something out there that people are going to be interested in."
Heck
So,
yeah. It was funny when I was on I think it was the Instagram feed last night, I very quickly realized that, you've got video and photos of kind of out and about doing the stuff, but there are a few graphics, holiday order window is opening. And
right,
I remember making the note, gosh, I have to ask him about his social feed. And, clearly he's employing a designer to help, or he's a
right,
graphic designer himself. And then I went to the site and read and learned and went, oh, I see what's going on here.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's very cool. So, you've referenced the menu a couple of times. Tell me a bit about where you started. So back in 2013, 2014, when day one, so to speak, of the food business, what did the menu look like? How many items? What were they? And then tell me a bit about how it's evolved over time. Or, if the menu has been the menu from day one, just talk me through that a bit.
Well, we never set out to start a waffle business, honestly. I got a waffle maker for a gift, and I had two young boys, and I got obsessed with making the perfect waffle. And 2,000 waffles later, I had the perfect, what I thought was a perfect waffle. We were at a party of some friends, and we were all mingling around. There were probably 50 people there. And all of a sudden, we hear this person screaming in another room. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, what is this? What is this?" And she's holding a waffle, and she's ecstatic. And I was just trying to bring something that everybody would enjoy to this party. And next thing you know, people are raving about the waffles, and people want us to bring waffles to family functions, to social functions. I brought them to school for my students at the end of the semester just to say, "Hey, thanks. What a great job you guys did this semester. These are on me. Enjoy." And so that kind of evolved. I know I'm deviating a little bit here, but
Oh, this is great.
we kind of got a sense that my job was in jeopardy because of budget cuts at NKU, and I thought, well, I better start thinking about a plan B. And I thought I had a couple more years left at NKU, and I ended up getting let go sooner than I thought, which ended up, we started the truck while I was in my last year of teaching, and we started out with a very basic menu, something simple, just to try to be able to stay above water, because I was teaching at the same time as I was running the truck in the off hours or on the weekends. And once I was let go because of budget cuts, I thought, okay, I've got a mortgage, I've got a family, I've got mouths to feed. I can't sit here and cry about this. I've just got to move on. And so a former student and I built the truck, and once we got the truck up and running, we experimented a lot, but things that worked, things that didn't work. Initially, we were an all-sweet truck, and that worked well for a while. And then when the wintertime came, we thought, well, shoot, we can't really serve ice cream, and this big ice cream freezer is taking up a ton of space. What can we do to complement the truck? So we started serving savory items. So we started serving waffle breakfast sandwiches and chicken and waffles, and the chicken and waffles and the breakfast sandwiches didn't come until probably midway, so about 5 years into the truck.
Okay.
But that's definitely branched out. And now we've got 10 sweet options that we rotate in and out, but there's usually a steady, probably 4 or 5 sweet options on the menu. And then we don't really open up the savory options unless it's a private event and they're willing to pay for it, or it's an event we know that we typically do pretty well if we sell the savory items. It's just, with the savory items, there's a lot more preparation involved, and if we don't sell the item, then we have to throw it out. And so there's a lot more loss incurred if you're throwing out proteins that we can't if you make a chicken and waffle on the flat top, you can't save it and reserve it the next day. If you were to
Right.
do barbecue, you can hold that for a day or two if you don't sell it. But yeah, we try to be uh, conscious of our spending in terms of certain things.
So I have a couple of follow-ups there, but one of the last things you said was about prep for the savory items, which, by the way,
Yeah,
based on the photos on the site, look incredible.
yeah,
I'm a
thanks.
big breakfast sandwich guy, so one day I'll
Oh, they're
have to.
phenomenal.
Oh my God, they look so good. But that was a question I had when I saw them is, okay, this has got to be prep happening on the truck. So with the waffles, I get the impression, considering that you can package them or you can have them available, not on the truck at places like coffee shops, that you can prepare them, they can keep for some period of time. I know you said they don't keep
Hmm.
for a super long period of time. There's actually one of my favorite bagel shops back in Toledo, Ohio, where I grew up called
Oh,
Berry
good bagels
Bagels,
are awesome.
and they don't have preservatives in them, which they've always been
Right.
asked to ship them, but they don't keep super long because of that. But it's also one of the reasons they're so damn good. So when
Hmm.
it comes to like your base level items, waffles with toppings and things like that, I imagine you're doing the waffles are pre-made and then you're showing up and doing the toppings there. A, tell me if that's accurate, and then B, talk to me about the savory stuff you're actually cooking on the truck. Is that
Right.
correct?
Well, it's a little kind of opposite. We have a commissary. There's no way we
Okay.
could do what we do without a commissary. The volume that we do, we couldn't keep everything in the truck and prepare everything in the truck. So we have a 800 square foot commissary. We've got a walk-in freezer. We keep all of our ingredients there. I'll prep all the waffle dough before an event, and then as we're going to the event, the dough's rising. So we want the dough to rise for at least an hour, hour and a half before we make the waffles. So I'd say 99% of the time we are making waffles fresh on the truck when you get them. If we are doing a breakfast sandwich, I might par cook the bacon and the geta at the commissary, while I'm making the dough, so that when we get to the event, food trucks are very limited on space. So real estate wise, the griddle, if you're putting bacon on a flat top or even geta, I don't know if you've cooked geta before, but
Oh yeah,
it has to sit and you can't move it. Otherwise, it just
falls
falls
apart.
apart. Yeah, so I try to cook all of that beforehand so that when we get there, all we have to do is make the waffles and build the sandwich. Everything
Okay,
except for maybe the eggs are already made.
got
It's
it.
all about efficiency with a food truck. You try to, you know, timing is everything. And if you've got 200 people to serve in 2 hours, you can't show up, unprepared. And in the beginning, we did show up unprepared, but it only has to happen once or twice, and you're embarrassed and humiliated. And it's like, that's never going to happen again. And you make sure you get it right the next time so that you keep having all these repeat customers.
No, that's cool to hear. There's got to be a system, and like you said, you get burned
Exactly.
once, and
Yeah.
you feel foolish about it, and you go, okay, how can we make this happen?
Right.
And
Right.
Marty, you're doing an awesome job of a lot of times when a question pops into my head, you manage to answer it before you finish your comment. So I don't know if that was an estimate or a real number, but in a couple of hours, can you serve 200 people? Is that kind of the speed and volume you can get off the truck?
If we have a sweet menus are really quick. The Pete, my helper, he's been with me from the very beginning. Like I said, he was a former student. He and I gel really well. He's like a little brother. He's also a professional musician, so his schedule and my schedule work really well together. And if it's a sweet menu, we can do 120 to 150 people an hour. We run 3 or 4 waffle irons at a time, and each iron makes 4 waffles. So we're making a dozen waffles every 4 or 5 minutes. So as long as we get to an event an hour before, we're up by 50 to 70 waffles. We can keep that pace, and everybody's getting a hot waffle every 30 to 45 seconds.
Very cool. Is there any, so your wife Julie helps out on the marketing design side. You're
Yep.
obviously the chief on the truck, and then you've
Right.
got one person that helps from time to time. In terms,
Right.
do you also have staff that works in the commissary? And if you wouldn't mind, when you answer that, could you just explain for those that might not know it what a commissary kitchen is?
Sure. A commissary is basically the back of the house of any restaurant. There's no front of the house. There's no, tables or anything for people to sit. We don't have retail hours. It's just a place where I park my truck. I plug it in to keep the refrigeration going. and it's where we store all of our ingredients and supplies, and like plates, napkins, silverware or flatware, beverages if we serve beverages, and we prepare all of our food there. What we can't prepare on the truck, or to get a head start, we prepare the dough there. All the holiday orders we're doing now are done in the commissary. So it's a private kitchen. We have a health inspector come in a couple times a year. I'm FDA approved because I have a wholesale business. So an FDA representative will come in from the state of Kentucky once every year and a half or 2 years, because we're very low risk. We're just making waffles. We don't have any meat or protein that makes things a little bit more complicated from a contamination or concern with the health department. So
Sure. Okay. And then, so in terms of the people doing the work there, making the food, is this you? Do you have other people that work at the kitchen?
right. Well, it is primarily me and Pete. In the
Okay.
past, when we do the big events, I've had other employees. I've had two fantastic college kids that approached me when they were in high school, and they worked for me for 6 or 7 years. They were on payroll. They're both finishing up their advanced degrees, moving on to their big boy, big girl jobs, and they've always said that if you ever need help, we'd love to help you. So they're going to come back and help for a couple of days with the holiday orders. But right now, with the types of events and situations we are in with the food truck, Pete and I can usually do just about anything. It can be tiring sometimes,
Sure.
but we're lean and mean, and keep it simple, and always looking to work smarter and not necessarily harder. So,
If you don't mind my asking, what does the kitchen cost you per month?
well, if you're looking at utilities, rent, insurance, I'm looking at about $2,000 a month just for the insurance, utilities, and the rent.
The space. Okay.
The space, yeah.
Cool. Okay, let me get back to some of the questions I came up with
Sure.
a bit ago. So, again, you and your wife both working as educators, and you realized that some things were changing at Northern Kentucky University, and maybe your job was at risk. You went for a plan B. I feel like most people's plan B would be quite a bit more conventional. What gave you the guts for this to be plan B? And especially as
Well,
someone who, and correct me if I'm wrong, you hadn't run a business before, right? In terms of being a business person. I realize you were a
no.
professional and you were a grown adult, right? But what gave you the guts to go down this path and knew you'd make it work?
Well, I love teaching. I love the students, but the politics of teaching were really difficult for me. I, you know, honestly, the food truck, the waffles were, they kind of found me at the right place at the right time. And I think one of the things that works well with my wife and I, and she would probably disagree sometimes, is we have a really good yin and yang relationship. I'm the risk taker. She's very adverse to risk. So, it was a huge risk in the beginning, especially
Sure.
with career, 180-degree turn, and it was just a lot of hard work. I've always worked extremely hard with no matter what I do, and I try to tell my kids that if you really want to do something, you work your ass off, and things will fall into place for you. It's not to say that you're not going to have to sacrifice some things and you're going to have to go without with some things. But if you are diligent and work hard and are smart about it, hopefully things will fall into place. And I'd say my weakness is sort of the business side, all the paperwork stuff that's related to running a business. I'm definitely the people person. Being a college professor, you know how to talk to people, you know how to talk to the public. Creativity wise, you have a really good product. We have a great branding with the truck. Everything works really well. But the backside of the business, all of the paperwork and taxes and bookkeeping, those were things that I learned right away that, I can't do this. This is something that I want to pay a professional to do this. So It took a couple years to admit that I needed to pay somebody to do that because I just was pulling my hair out and I just couldn't, do everything. So pay people to do the things you don't know how to do.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And I guess from my perspective, it goes to show that if you get the big things right in terms of the business concept and the brand and, the dedication, that some of the in the weeds business stuff you can subcontract or get help with and still be in business for a freaking decade like you have been. I think sometimes people get caught up to say, gosh, I'm really passionate about whatever it might be, but I'm not that business person. I'm not real financially savvy or whatnot. And not to say that
Right.
anyone could just wade into any business and have success, but I think, again, if the dedication and the hard work is there, and this is a lot of things that have to align in order for it to go right, but so to speak, it can. You don't have to be the
Right.
business wizard on day one, and I'm sure that there's tons of things you've learned over time as well.
Yeah. Well, just understand your weaknesses and don't be afraid to reach out to people to help you with those weaknesses because that definitely bit me in the beginning. And, we're much better, admitting that and paying the people to do the things that I can't do. So.
And I imagine when you refer to paying other people to do it, these aren't full-time employees. Is that accurate? Is this
No, I'm talking about like bookkeeping and accountant and those things that, after you've worked 12 hours a day, do you want to go into QuickBooks and balance stuff or after a week of working, 16 hours a day, do you have the energy to go in on a Sunday night when all you want to do is just relax and put all that stuff in or, figure out what your quarterly taxes are, how they've, added up and where to write the check or send the check or go online to the portal and do all of that stuff. It's just yeah, we're working smarter. So
I like it. Okay, one more thing and then we'll move on. You mentioned that you built the truck.
yeah,
Did you build the inside of the truck or did you build this thing like from the ground up? Talk to me about that process.
we built it from the ground up. So I had some situations when I was teaching that I hadn't quite reached a threshold, and I knew that in addition to the possibility of my job not being there because of budget cuts, I just thought that I the the type of classification I was as a professor was one that I didn't have tenure, so I wasn't able to sort of move up the tenured ladder. I was on a rung that was not going anywhere, and it was never going to go anywhere. And so I thought I've got to figure something out. And I'd reached a couple points where I thought, man, I can't do this anymore. And then I reached a threshold, and so I bought a truck. I remember the day I went out to this guy up in Mainville, Ohio. He was sitting out in his front yard. He was strung out. I don't know what on, but I said, I've got cash. What's your best offer? He was asking 4,500, and he said, I'll take two. And I said,
Nice.
whoa, okay, let's get to the DMV and the clerk and get this title transferred before you change your mind. So that happened really quick. I brought the truck back and it sat in my driveway for a year before I had the wherewithal or the courage or the confidence to just make the leap and cut into the truck because it was a huge leap and I was afraid to make the leap. But until you reach a threshold in what you're doing or what I was doing as a teacher, to say enough is enough with what I needed to get out of a job and where I was not going or headed, I thought, you know what, let's just start this truck. And so I asked Pete, my former student, I hear you're looking for some work. Let's get this thing started. And we gutted the truck. We cut a big hole in the side. I ordered a big service window. Having been a sculptor, I knew all about the tools and looked at YouTube videos. And within over a year, we built the truck. We rented a space and a big painting booth and pulled the truck in there and painted the truck. And my wife, being the designer, branded the whole thing. And a year later, we pulled it out, and it was glorious. The day that we got it back from the detailer who put all the
Wrap on it.
the wrap on it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, how satisfying of a process was that? And how bumpy was it? Or was it pretty damn smooth?
Well, we when it was interesting because it was one giant sculpture. And so when I would make artwork, you would get to a point in a project where it was nowhere near done, but you would get it finished enough to where you thought, oh man, this is going to be something. I see where this is headed now, and you get goosebumps. And the food truck was kind of that way. We subleased a spray booth from a guy in Latonia, and he moved into a different space, and he said, I'm still renting this space, but but you're going to rent it for me and you don't have to deal with my landlord. And it kind of sounded sketchy, but we said, okay, well, all right. So we had our truck in the space for a month. We took it apart. We detailed it. We were painting it. And all of a sudden, the owner of the space comes in and says, you're not supposed to be in here. And you need to leave ASAP. And it's like, oh man, you can't do this right now. The other guy rented the space to us. We have, can you just give us through the end of the weekend to finish painting this truck? That's all we need is 3 more days. And he kind of looked at us, and he knew that we were respectful. We didn't damage the space. It was in the winter time, so it was cold. We had a space heater. And he says, fine, you got to be out of here by Monday night. So we worked tirelessly for 3 straight days after we'd been working there for 2 weeks. And we got the truck painted, and when we pulled it out of the space and had all of our equipment in the truck, we were like, wow, this is really cool. And the owner of the space, who saw the truck when we pulled out, he's like, man, you guys actually did a pretty good job with this for the first time, never having painted anything before. So we were ecstatic. So.
That's crazy. It's awesome. I mean, to undertake a project like that, having never done anything like it before, and get it done. This is the same truck you're using today?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Let me ask you this. I'm sure you've heard this saying before, which is, do you work to live or do you live to work? I definitely don't get the impression, and this was before we even started speaking, that you live to work, which is an unhealthy place to be anyway, right?
Right.
But would you say that you're just working to live, or are you somewhere in between there? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I'd say I'm somewhere in between. I mean, I am definitely content with this as an occupation. After doing this for 10 years, it becomes sort of an appendage in a way. I mean, you can't get away from it. I mean, you see people in town and hey, there's the waffle guy, or people see you and they introduce you as this is Marty from Marty's Waffles. And, I always say, well, tonight I'm Beckett's dad. I'm here at his basketball game.
Right.
I'm watching my son play.
It's not about the waffles today.
I can't get away from the context of me being attached to the food truck. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I'm content with what I'm doing. I mean, there are a lot of other things that people wish they could be doing that were a lot more gratifying, that weren't as exhausting. But I have really very few complaints about what I do. I enjoy being around the public and kind of get a little lonely in the slow season in January and February, and kind of yearn to get back out to have that human contact. So.
Heck yeah. Well, in those down months, do you get time to make art, do sculpting? Or are there other businesses you're involved in, or is this the primary and it's just a bit seasonal?
This is the primary. We stay operational all year round if we can. In January and February, it gets to the point where it gets to be so cold that the dough doesn't rise in the truck, because it's just, you need it to be 60, 70 degrees for the dough to rise effectively. The propane doesn't work on the grill. It's just, you're freezing cold. It's just not a pleasant experience being in a truck when it's 15 degrees outside. It might be a little warmer inside, but one thing I've learned as I've done this for 10 years and as I've gotten older, and regardless of whether it's a food truck or teaching, is you can't be grinding 24 hours a day your entire life. You have to find a balance between your work and also playtime or downtime. And I've got some health issues that I'm trying to make better. I mean, I've got diabetes, probably not because of the waffles, but I've been an avid dessert connoisseur my entire life, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. And I'm managing it really well, but as you get older, it's not as it's harder to manage. So I try to balance that with trying to get outside, and if you're working every day all day, you can't do that. So I try to recharge in January and February, and don't feel guilty about it as much anymore, because I know that once March, April, May hit, it's crazy schedule time.
Heck yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. I think important for people to hear, and myself
Yeah,
included. I think I'm finally getting there maturity wise as well, where it's like, man, the rest days, when it comes to exercise or work or whatever, like taking it slow sometimes is just what you need so that you're not burnt the hell out, so that you can actually
right,
give your 75, 80% when you are locked in.
right.
All right. God, this has been a lot of awesome stuff. I liked starting off with some of the more, creative questions as opposed to diving right into finances. But again, I know
Sure.
that in this world, because, and I could be off base here, but I feel like there are a lot of people in our country who are interested in this type of business because it feels manageable. I'm just going to have a truck. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to keep my
Hmm.
costs low. And so I do want to dive into the financial piece a little bit. And you've already
Sure.
divulged some numbers. So I think you said you spent $2,000 on the truck. You got a sweet, I think you got like a
Well,
60%
yeah,
discount.
the initial truck, but I spent thousands of dollars, just
What
taking it
went
to the
into it?
mechanic and saying, "Hey, you, I need this road ready," and that was another 10 grand, and I put 3 motors in the truck in 10 years, and you know,
And
it's
what
it's
about the
it's
equipment that went into it? I know this is some time ago now, but I guess
yeah.
two things. Do you remember? So again, let's just say we've got 2K for the vehicle itself. How much did you spend in flat top grills and everything else you needed in there? I imagine you have a generator of some kind. And have
Right,
you had to replace any of that equipment over time? I imagine some of that stuff's had to be
right.
replaced.
We've had to replace a generator a couple times. I don't think generators are really meant to be used for 7, 8 hours. Sometimes 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. They're
Sure.
usually auxiliary meant as a backup, but that's how we use them. The outfitting the truck, if you took the cost of the truck plus the wrap, the paint job, or the interior, it was probably close to 35, 40 grand. But keep in mind, we did the work ourselves. So
Right.
if you had somebody build that out, it would have easily been 80, 90 to 100 grand for the truck.
And that was in 2013. So in
Correct.
2024, who knows what that might cost you?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
especially after COVID. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All fair points. Um, did you take any loans or anything like that when it came to the initial investment in the truck?
No, I did not. My father had passed away in 2011. He left a little bit of money. It was like 26,000, excuse me. And I used that as part of the initial investment. And then when I got let go from I had a full working furniture shop where I had, woodworking equipment, welding equipment. And when the business in the very beginning, the first 2 or 3 years, it was really lean. I sold all of that to, pay bills, to invest into the business. Anything that I made on the food truck went back into the business. You pay into retirement, or you pay into unemployment your entire life when you're working. They're part of
Sure.
your money that comes out every month or every week or 2 weeks, however you get paid, is for unemployment. And when I lost my job, I should have taken unemployment or at least applied for it.
Yeah.
But there was a pride issue there, and I took money out of some of my retirement, which was, in hindsight, a big mistake. But that helped me get, the business sort of stabilized for the first 2 or 3 years before I started making enough income to be able to pay myself. Because the first 2 or 3 years of any business, you're not really bringing in any money unless you're putting it back into the business. I mean, you wouldn't be able to survive unless in rare situations where some people really just thrive right out of the gate, but
Right.
most
Some sort of
businesses don't.
unicorn scenario.
Right.
Um, Gosh, just to, a quick aside, and I was listening to a podcast this morning when I got up that made a similar point. Just to the point you made about unemployment, it feels like that benefit that we have as American citizens needs a rebranding, right? Because I mean, we are
Yeah.
literally paying into this thing, and then I am
Right.
sure that you're not alone in feeling that way, where it's like,
Yeah.
gosh, I don't want to. I just wonder if it went by a different name, something that more
Right.
accurately explained exactly that it was your money, that it's our money, and that when we
Right.
need it,
Right.
it's there for us. And
That's
anyway,
a really, yeah, a great point. I wish I would have,
I'm
it's
sure
a
that's
pride
somewhat by
issue.
design, though, right? From a
Yeah.
government standpoint, they probably have no real incentive to say, you know what, we should make people feel better about utilizing this money that's
Yeah.
available to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Let them keep it and earn the interest on it.
Marty, I feel like you kind of said something about this, but I'll ask it more directly. When you got into this back in 2013, were you thinking about food costs versus profit versus, break even? Did you think about that? Did you have a sense for it and what you should be charging, or was that something you really kind of had to learn on the job?
Well, yeah, I did a lot of due diligence before we started the food truck. So when we started in 2013, in 2012, we went to, and there weren't very many, but we went to all of the food truck events that were in town. There were only about a dozen food trucks at the time. And I asked questions to a lot of the vendors. One of the vendors that I spoke with a lot is actually, we share a commissary together now, Elizabeth from Sugar Snap. She was very, open and honest, and has become a great friend. And I asked a lot of questions because I didn't want to make too many mistakes. I figured you couldn't, the best thing you can do is do your due diligence if you have the time to do it. Because if you go in blind, which is what I think a lot of people do when they start a food truck, they don't understand a lot of things, and so they try to fly by the seat of their pants, or they think, oh, I know what to do, this is pretty easy, I should be able to hang with this. But it doesn't work that way. You have to be informed with anything before you take such a giant leap. And so
For sure.
for a year we asked a ton of questions, observed a lot of things, kind of looked and listened. And when we started, yeah, we were very conscious about food costs and how much it costs. And when you're starting out, you're making a lot more because you want to be ready for those customers when they get to the window, and then they don't show up, and you're sitting there all day long, and then you have all this food, and it's like, well, geez, I gotta throw all this out. Those were kind of discouraging days in the beginning, but yeah, you have to do your due diligence, otherwise you're going to fumble with a lot of those things you mentioned.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so I work in marketing. Again, I have a design background, but I'm a marketing guy, and we often talk about you've got to talk to your customers. You can't make assumptions about what's important to them or what
Yeah.
problems you're solving. You were doing market research, right? You were really
Yeah.
getting in the weeds to say, hey, let me learn from your mistakes, which,
Right.
it's kind of
Well,
what I'm trying to do for our audience here is, you're being gracious enough to share your wisdom so that if people go down this path, they can, you know, make some good moves too.
yeah. I mean, there were plenty of dessert options out there from food trucks, and so we were looking at what their price points were. There's another big waffle place in town that everybody knows about, and not that we compete with them. We're so small compared to them, but we obviously didn't want to be higher than what their price point was. But we also, I think, if you price things too low, in some instances you could also devalue your product, where
For
it's like,
sure.
oh yeah, okay, we're selling an Eggo waffle, that's why they're $2 a piece. Well, no, they're not $2 a piece. These are handmade, they're artisanal, there's ingredients are expensive,
They're
and
freaking
this is
delicious.
no thanks, this is what we charge. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, you was referring to like a comparable in real estate. It's like it's not identical, but it's got the same number of bedrooms. It's on a similar,
Right.
plot of land. It's in the same
Yeah.
area. Like, hey, we should be in line with them.
Yep.
Marty, if you wouldn't mind, tell me a bit about your annual revenue and also growth over time. You mentioned for the first handful of years, small businesses for the large in part shouldn't expect to profit, which I think is fair and in line with what I've heard. But if you wouldn't mind, and it is to whatever extent you mind being specific about numbers would be awesome. But
Sure.
like, where are you today and kind of how did that go over time to the point that you can remember?
Yeah, so the first year, I think we were only in business from August till the end of the year in 2013, and I think we grossed maybe $6,000 or $7,000. And obviously that's you're operating in a deficit at that point with everything we had invested. But each year we saw growth to the point where by the third year, I think we had hit like 70 or 80,000. And by the, pre-COVID, we were in the, I'm not going to give you exact numbers, but we were in the low 200s. And that's kind of where we're at, fluctuating, 15 or $20,000 in the years that, since COVID, above 200. And I have chosen, I have two kids. I have a son that's a freshman at Alabama, and I have a freshman that's in high school, and he plays football. And I am not going to miss my freshman high school sports season. So with a lot of the things that we do during the week with all the private events, it's sort of allowed me to shift my schedule around a little bit to where I don't have to work every Friday night or Saturday morning like I have for the last 9 or 10 years. And so this year I decided I'm once I find my son's schedule, I'm setting those dates aside. I'm not working those days because I'm not missing my son's stuff, and I'm not going to watch it on an iPad while I'm working. So I'm going to be present. I come from divorced parents, and unfortunately, when you're young, you need that support from your parents, and I've chosen that's I'm supporting my kids. So family first. So
In those instances where you block off your calendar, does that mean do you send someone else if an event is on those days, or you guys just aren't available for those days?
we're just not available. Because it's just me and my other employee Pete primarily. I'm the only one that drives the truck. I don't know. Maybe I have a hang up or trust issues, but if somebody else were to drive the truck and get in an accident, I'm screwed. I mean, that's my livelihood, and if it's going to happen, it's going to be my fault, not somebody else's fault.
To me, that makes
So,
sense.
I mean, if I had more employees, maybe a smaller truck or something that was a little bit, it's a 30-year-old truck, and so there's a lot of subtleties in driving it and knowing the ins and outs, and it's just like any other relationship you might have with a person or your spouse. There's certain body language, mannerisms, sounds that your wife might make or a look you might get. It's the same with my wife is going to kill me, but it's the same. You get feedback from the food truck as you're driving it
That others wouldn't pick up on
that
necessarily.
others wouldn't pick up on, and I just choose to operate that way at this point. If it wasn't so heavy on the food truck, yeah, I trust my employee to run the commissary, no problem. But the food truck, that's kind of I'm the only one that drives a truck.
Makes total sense. And I'll be honest with you, Marty. I love your message, which is basically we're keeping the number of people involved low. This is a lifestyle business. It enables me to be there for my children and my wife and my family. And it's the kind of business that if the day comes that I would like to have. And that's not to say that, striving for scale and to have a bigger team and multiple trucks and all of this,
Right.
that's awesome. For the people who want that. I spoke to Kristen Bailey of Sweets and Meats Barbecue. I
Yeah,
don't know
she's a
if you
good
know
friend.
Kristen. She was awesome to talk to, but to hear
Yeah.
holy smokes, they've got 17 people and 5 vehicles and they're doing awesome, and she's loving it, right? I don't know how many years they've been in business. I forget now. I'm sure she told me.
They
But
started about the same time we did.
okay, very
Yeah.
cool. And it's just, I'm so glad to hear your story because it's similar in a lot of ways in
Right.
terms of kind of happening into the business, and you weren't necessarily planning on it, so to speak. But then
Right.
in terms of the model, it's very different. And like I said, it's more in
Yeah.
line with how I visualize myself as a potential business owner, which is let's keep this thing as small and tight as we can. Anything that I can
Right.
do, I'll do. But to your point, and I'm in line with this too, the books, that's definitely something I would spend some money to hire somebody for. But
Yeah.
anyhow, enough said. I think that's pretty cool. Um, Let me see here. So tell me a bit more about, so, you mentioned Perfect North, which is the ski place. I imagine they're mostly in business during the winter months when the truck business
Right.
is a bit
Right.
slower. What kind of volume are you guys sending their way? Are they serving the waffles out of their concessions? Is that the way that works?
Well, if you've ever been to Perfect North, they have a huge cafeteria, and they also have a, a space that you can access from the outside. Unfortunately, they don't sell them in the big cafeteria. I'd like, it'd be great if they would because we'd get a lot more exposure there. But they have a small little corner coffee nook where they sell the waffles with other pastries, and then they have an outdoor sort of ski up kind of a place where you can order some limited types of foods that I don't think it's the full menu they have in the cafeteria. But it's not a huge volume. I mean, for a ski resort, I wish we could sell a lot more of them. And I think with the proper marketing, we could probably push that up a lot. But I'm not a pushy person. I'm not a salesperson. That's probably to a fault too. I tend to look at things a lot more organically, and kind of the attitude: if it happens, it happens. I'm willing to work and put in the time, but if I'm not a pushy salesperson, so I'm not trying to oversell or, oh, you need to do it here, 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 and here, and if it works, it works.
And if the
That's
market
probably it.
demands it, right? If
Right.
people are excited enough and asking about it, hopefully you think the people running Perfect
Yeah.
North will go, all right, cool, we got to get these
It's
things
more
out there.
exposure, but people see them there, and then that's what leads to private events sometimes too. Like, oh, well, we had your waffles at Perfect North. Do you do catering, or do you do private parties? We do a lot of graduations, a lot of weddings. So sometimes a really great product, knowing that it's local, people give you a call and say, hey, is this what can I do to get these personally instead of having to go to Perfect North?
Marty, that's actually a perfect segue. What are your key channels in terms of booking private events? Are people finding you on social media? Are they, or is it a referral situation where you go to an event and someone there says, "Hey, we run this organization, or we have, this wedding coming up, or whatever the case." What are the primary drivers of new business for you? And I know you said in the open that you're to the point where it's a lot of repeat business. So I guess
Right.
more specifically on the new business side, when you're signing up new clients.
Yeah. So, with regards to private events, it's renting a food truck for an event is not something that everybody can afford. Unfortunately, so a lot of our clients are they come from more established means, I would say, and so they have a little bit more disposable income. They might hire us for a wedding. I would say a wedding is one of those options where you splurge a little bit more because it's
Sure.
hopefully a once in a lifetime experience. You want to give the guests something to remember, but we get referrals from weddings or firsthand experience. Well, I had your waffles at so and so's wedding. I would love it if you could serve at our wedding. Or you did a friend of ours graduation, and I have a son that's graduating next year. What does it look like to rent you for a graduation party? We have My wife has done a fantastic job with the website. People are, if they're interested in a food truck, one of the first things they do is they look online or they'll Google food trucks in Cincinnati, and I think we come up there pretty high on the list in terms of the search optimization.
That's
And
huge.
so when they look at our website, my wife is a fantastic designer, and so there's a visual professionalism with the website that isn't your sort of cookie cutter. Let's plug in your images here and your dates here with some of these build your own websites. I mean, she built everything from code from the base up. Um, Spent a lot of time and consideration there. So I mean, that's what she does professionally, and she's very meticulous, and so that definitely helps. Um, there are a part of a food truck organization in town, the Cincinnati Food Truck Association, CFTA, and we have a queue on our website that's book a truck. It's a tab. You type in the parameters of your event, and the customer hits submit. It goes to all of our members, and you look at all of the dates, the times, what they're willing, their budget and all of that. And if you're interested or available, then you contact that person and say, hey, I'd like to throw my name in the hat for consideration. In the beginning, that was where we got a lot of leads, but now it's a lot of referrals, a lot of repeat, and a lot of people just coming to the website and looking at the website.
Was there ever a period in time where you guys ran ads on Facebook or anything like that?
We do. We run ads primarily when we do, in the very beginning of the podcast, we had talked about online ordering. We do online ordering only for seasonal waffle sales of waffles by the dozen. So we make waffles the day or the day before, we freeze them. We set up a pickup date. People prepay. They show up. All I got to do is give me your name, and they pick up the waffles, and they're off. So it's very simple. It's very easy. We've been doing this for 6 or 7 years now. And I forget where I'm going with this.
So you ran, I think you were saying.
Oh, yeah, Facebook ads. Right.
Promotion.
So we that's when we would run a Facebook ad, is to remind people, hey, the Christmas holiday orders are coming up. Don't forget to place an order if you're interested. We do it at Valentine's. We do it at Easter. We do it sometimes if we make too many in the summertime, people are kind of jonesing for a pickup. And so, yeah.
So assuming, it sounds like you've done it on multiple occasions. Do you have a sense that it is, a net positive, so to speak, money spent on the ads?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Heck yeah. Well, that's great to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We see a high traffic, lots of comments, lots of shares, lots of likes, which are all things that, generate people to the site to see. And we'll do probably 700 or 800 dozen of waffles as a result of, the holiday sales. And a lot of that is just through the traffic on Facebook. So.
Oh, that's great. And I'll just say quickly that a lot of the business owners I've spoken to so far for the show aren't very much invested in what I'll call digital marketing. And that is what I do for a living. And it's been eye-opening in a good way, where, a lot of these people have built their businesses through word of mouth and referrals and organically, for lack of a better term. But it is cool for people to hear that, yes, you guys are, not every single day, not every week, but you've run ads and you've done so effectively. But I think that I'll just say for the audience's benefit that having a life partner, a spouse who is a designer and who is a web designer, it's not a mistake that you're having success. Facebook ads are inexpensive compared to a lot of paid advertising.
Yeah, right.
But you can't just go and slap anything out there. So for those of you who don't have a spouse or a best friend who is a graphic designer and a web designer, make sure that then this isn't a sales pitch, just to say what the message, the look and feel, the branding is important. So keep that in mind.
Right.
But Marty, we've come to kind of the end here of as far as the business stuff. But if you're cool with it, I have a few other quick, more personal, just kind of for fun questions I'd love to run by you. Number one is, where is somewhere in the world, and it can be, internationally or here in the United States or even in Kentucky or Ohio, where is somewhere that you have been that you think so highly of that you think others should visit in their life?
There's a few.
I'll take a couple.
I would say Yosemite National Park. It's gotten to the point now where you have to get a daily pass. You can't just drive in. It's so overpopulated, or it's gotten to be so crowded and overpopulated. But and get out of your car and hike in Yosemite. Don't just do the touristy things and pull off to the side of the road, take your picture, and go to the next, item on the map. Yosemite is spectacular. The California coast, actually the whole West Coast. Start in Seattle, go over to Olympic National Park, come back out, and then drive all the way down the coast of Washington to Southern California. When I was younger, I took a trip with a girlfriend, and I was probably 19 years old and drove across country, and that was probably the highlight of that trip, was that drive down the West Coast.
That is definitely something I have on my list. And it's cool that you mentioned 2 national parks, because just during the pandemic, we went down to Tennessee and hit a national park, which the name is escaping me right now. We've been to a few, but that was something my wife and I decided that we're going to start, deliberately doing, is hitting national parks. So I love that. And then where is a place, and it could be a couple places that you haven't been that you would like to go?
I've never been to Hawaii. I would love to go to Hawaii. I think my wife and I talk. Actually, my helper, my employee Pete, he goes to Hawaii a couple, once every couple years. His parents have a a timeshare there, so he goes with them, and he's invited me to go with him multiple times, and it's like, Pete, I appreciate that, but my wife won't let me go unless I take her first, or she comes with us. So
sure.
yeah, Hawaii, I would love to go to. Italy and Greece would be spectacular, for the scenery and for the food.
Heck yeah. No, those are awesome. And on my last show with Kristen, she mentioned Hana, which I kind of reflected on it the other day. Hana is on the east coast of Maui. And it
Okay.
is absolutely gorgeous. So I've only ever been to Maui, and it was just last April. And
Oh,
I think
nice.
in a lot of Americans' minds, Hawaii holds a special place, but almost a cliche place. Where you're like, God, is it really
Sure.
that great? And then we showed up, and we got to the airport and got in the car and started driving to the rental car place. And I kind of looked around. We weren't near the water quite yet, and I went, oh, so this is it. And then we started driving to Hana, and I was like, oh, this is it. It's
Yeah.
but not just Hana. I mean, we spent time in Kihei at Maui, which is just, a
Okay.
town within Maui,
Uh-huh.
kind of in the center of it, right on the water as well. We were in love with it. It's a fantastic place. So you should definitely
Yeah.
make
It'd
that
be.
happen, you and your
How
wife.
long were you there?
We were there, I think 8 days. So we were there for a wedding, but we got there early and then we stayed a few days
Oh,
after.
perfect.
It was a
Yeah.
good amount of time. And we had some purpose, right? We had some stuff to do, but
Hmm.
we made the most of it. We were in a couple different spots. It was the best trip I've ever been on, which is what I said when I spoke to Kristen too.
Awesome. Hmm.
Okay, two more, which is number one, who is another business owner? And they can be local, they can be food business, they can be completely unrelated, but who's another business owner that you would suggest that I talk to on the podcast?
There's a gentleman. His name's Joe Heil. He started Barleycorns.
Okay.
He helped me out in the very beginning of my um, start with Marty's Waffles. He actually was doing a chicken and waffles on his menu, and we were regular customers there before we started the business. And he added a chicken and waffle, and he was serving this really normal waffle, kind of like just a step up from an Eggo waffle, but bought from a restaurant supply. And I said, Joe, what are you doing? I said, I've got a waffle truck. It's sitting right outside there, and you've asked me about it before. Why don't you try the Marty's waffle and see what it does with your chicken and waffle dish? And he's like, yeah, I should probably do that. So he tried it, and he's like, wow, okay. So he was my first wholesale customer, but
Nice.
one of the things that happened was the health department came in and they saw my waffles in his freezer, and they're like, we got to quarantine these. This guy doesn't have a permit to be selling you waffles. He's got a food truck,
Oh no.
but he doesn't have a license from the state of Kentucky to wholesale. So Joe was like, oh, don't worry, Marty, we'll figure this out. He says, I'll let you use my kitchen in the morning when we're not busy making waffles, because the FDA required you have a brick and mortar kitchen like a commissary. And he helped let me set up there in the very beginning. This is before I had my commissary, and so we were supplying waffles to them. And he's just a very supportive businessman. He gives back to the community. He's since sold Barleycorns to another entity, or a local entity, but he's still a businessman, and has other ventures going on. But very knowledgeable, very wise, and has done a lot of good, and helped me out a lot in the very beginning, for
Heck yeah.
sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the FDA. Is it a license? Is that what you said?
FDA, the federal
FDA.
FDA. Yep.
Is that an annual thing? And what does that cost to have? So what I understand is it's required for you to wholesale, but not
Right.
necessarily to sell off of the food truck. That's its own separate
Right.
license, I would imagine. Is that something you have to maintain annually? And what's the cost to that? Or isn't
It
there a cost?
is. Yeah, no, you have to maintain. You have to have books that you keep with, the orders. You have to keep track of the serial numbers, or the barcode numbers on all of your products, and the dates on the products. Just in case there's a recall, you get a recall notice, then you have to yank your stuff off the shelves. You tell your customer, hey, there's been a recall with the flour or with the
Right.
salt, just as a precaution, we need to remove these from from your freezer and dispose of them. We'll bring you more, that sort of a thing. That's never happened, but it's about $120 a year just to renew the permit. It's not a big deal.
But
You
that
know,
makes sense that for food safety reasons, you kind of got to be
absolutely.
plugged into the system so if something goes
Right,
wrong, proper
right.
people can be informed.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. And then I guess lastly, let's shout out your business. Where can people find you guys online? Your website, where are the best, I guess, social places to follow where you guys are most active?
Well, we are, it's martyswaffles.com. We have a pretty extensive website with our backstory, our history, where I'm sure you saw a lot of information. We have our full calendar. It's a little light right now because we're heading into the slow season.
Sure.
But come March, things will really start to fill up. By April, most of our Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays are booked. We have, we're on Facebook. We have a pretty big presence there, although Facebook hasn't, we don't post a whole lot there because we used to post our schedule for where we were, but since we are not mostly, but we do a lot of private stuff now, we can't really post where we are because a lot of those customers don't want people, the general public, coming to these locations to
Sure.
order waffles. But we have my wife maintains the Instagram account. We used to be on Twitter, but when they changed to X, a lot of things changed with
Yeah.
that dynamic. So we're not active on X anymore, but Instagram and Facebook, definitely. Just look up Marty's Waffles. There's lots of information, lots of images. But the website by far is the most comprehensive. It's martyswaffles.com.
And that's how people could engage if they wanted to bring you out to a local event as well.
Absolutely. Yep. There's a phone number and email. Yep.
Cool. Marty, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate you taking the time and sharing so generously. And yeah, thanks so much and best of luck moving forward.
Thanks, James. I appreciate your time. Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
City champion, everybody is